And just like that, it's 8 o'clock again. It's Wednesday, Whiskey Wednesdays. The countdown is finished, so it's time for a dram. Time for an 8 o'clock live video, as always. On here every single night, doing a live stream at 8 o'clock. If I'm here, of course, or if I'm at an event, I'll try and squeeze one in maybe later that night or earlier that day, of course, is always sometimes fun. But in the meantime, I'm going to be here every night that I can be, doing a live stream and taking your questions, answering your questions, and discussing a little topic that I want to cover off each night if I get the chance to, but sometimes I get a bit sidetracked and derailed. Tonight, thank you everyone for joining, by the way. Robert Akers, Just Dramming, She Said Fine, Matt Music, Monarch Perth, all good, all my regulars. Good to see you all. Lee Wallace, hope you're well. So yeah, I just want to discuss just a couple little things tonight, and one of them is talking about age and talking about the effect of age on spirit and how young whiskey is underrated and overlooked often, and unfairly so, I should say. Ali's Whiskies. hope you're at a less noisy place this time, Ali. Hey Matt, for Whiskey Wednesday, can you talk about case 97972 from Anguish? Oh, what was that? Dinner from the panel, tasting with AD. Oh yeah, I'm going to get onto that, Cal. I'm going to talk about that. Karen, dark chocolate tin hams are not better than the originals. You saw that tweet, and it's you're wrong. It's okay. You can be wrong. Dark ones are better. Sorry, they are. They're just a better Tim Tam. I used to be an original Tim Tam guy, but let's be honest, the dark ones I think are better now. They're just, well, I like them better, so and therefore they're better. Juice Film Productions joined. Thank you, Benoit Jasmine. What a jumper. No SM, no shirt, must be cold hitting. Oh, it was a bit cooler earlier, Cal. I'm still wearing it, so whatever. It's my old 100 miles per hour hoodie, which for those who are keen motorcyclists might notice it's sort of a take on the Triumph logo. I love motorcycling, and I've got a Triumph that I love riding sometimes. Yes, agreed. Dark Tim Tams. Team Dark Tim Tams. You see, all the other flavors of Tim Tam, quite simply, are terrible. There's like berry one, there's a white chocolate one, there's a caramel one. Double coat is a waste. You only get like 9 Tim Tams in the pack because they're spaced out, they're bigger. They're all terrible. Dark ones are the best, then original, then the rest can all get stuffed. That's 2 votes for original. Two votes for original, 2 votes for dark. We're on the fence here. I want to talk about age tonight and the effect of age on whiskies, and how not all whiskies are created equal, and how older whiskey is lovely, teenage whiskey is lovely, young whiskey is lovely, and they're often overlooked. Let me do a bit of a preface here. Tim Tams are crap anyway. Okay, we've got 2 for dark, 2 for normal, and 1 just saying they're crap. That's fine. Look, I'm going to talk a little about age statements for a second. Let's rewind in history for a moment and determine what was happening when it comes to age in whiskey years ago, okay? What's happening in age in whiskey ages ago? Okay, so let's rewind to the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. This is a bit of a boom time for Scotch whiskey. And when I mean Scotch, I don't mean single malts. Single malts were not a thing then at all. This was blended whiskey. This whiskey was all designed to be blended back then, which is why blended whiskey today still has such a massive stronghold on the industry. For a good reason. I've got nothing against blended whiskey. As you know, we've done our own blends as well from time to time at Society, Exotic Cargo, Pete Ferry, Old Fashioned. Ding, 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 ding. So we've done them before. But what I want to talk about, how back then, in the 1950s, most blended whiskey was between 3 to 4 to 5 years of age. Now think about that for a second. Most blended whiskey was 3, 4, 5 years old. Did it taste young? Some of them did. Did they taste balanced and well and lovely to be bottled? Yes, they did. I think what happened in the 1980s and 90s was, late 80s, early 90s, was that there was this explosion in single malts, and the way to market single malt was to promote the age statement because it was more easily discernible. So if I'd had a 3-year-old cask from Glendullan and a 17-year-old cask from Glenfiddich, and I blended them together, that's a 3-year-old whiskey on the label now. So it wasn't worth disclosing the age. For those who remember at the Vaults evening, I featured this Thompson's blended whiskey, blended and bottled in the Vaults of Leith, and that was a lovely, lovely blended whiskey from the 1950s. It's all gone now, I'm sorry. Oh, it's just bits of cork in there now. It was a lovely blended whiskey from the 1950s, that one. And that was an example of how it was that was probably 3 or 4 years old, all up. The total components were probably 3 or 4 years old. Young Tim Tams are from Overlook too. Yes, Monarch Perth, of course they are. Sam, thanks for joining. Jamie Poos, thanks for joining. Yes, so that was a lovely welcome dram. It was all silky and old school. And it was 3 or 4 years old, very likely. It doesn't have an age statement on the bottle. They didn't print age statements. Not because they were trying to hide it. It wasn't part of the discussion back then. That kind of transparency was not a thing then. So I just want to emphasize that whiskey has traditionally been a young spirit. One of the other whiskies on the night was 123.1. A .1 from distillery 123. And you'll see on the label there, aged 8 years. That's an 8-year-old single cask, and that was the first ever. It's not a 30-year-old whiskey. It's not a 50-year-old whiskey. I think we get a bit wrapped up in some high age statements sometimes. You can be guaranteed at the Society that a 3-year-old whiskey or a 33-year-old whiskey or a 53-year-old whiskey is going to be of quality. It's already past tasting panel. However, is a 30-year-old whiskey better than a 3-year-old whiskey? No. It's just different. It's a different experience. And you'll find that often with younger whiskies, you get a visceral, quite distillery focus on some of them. And on older whiskies, you get a lovely sort of old school, dusty leather books and old libraries and rich old mahogany and leather couches. You get different tasting notes in each. You don't normally find they cross over too much in the middle, however. Age has increased in discussion in the early 2000s. That's true, Cal. Age was it's ever since the early 2000s, this marketing of single malts as they have to have like a really sort of substantial age statement. In fact, there's Scotch whisky marketing, especially of age statement, has a lot to answer for today these days, because we've stepped up and we've changed the dialogue has changed, and I think for the better. So, with that said, what we end up finding is that age statements become a point of almost like they become this point of where it has to be a certain age statement to be quality. And I think that's a really poor discussion. And I think it really needs to be more along the lines of, rather than it being about the quality, more about the transparency. And that's all it is about. So as I said, is a 30-year-old whiskey better than a 3-year-old whiskey? No, it isn't, sorry. It's just different. And just acknowledging that is really important. And I want to show you an example. I've showed you two examples of that, a really old paper label and an old Thompson's blend. They're long gone now. Obviously, we drank them all at the gathering. But I want to show you one of the whiskies that I don't think is an outturn. Oh, I should know this by now. It's this Friday. No, it's not an outturn. But it's called Tossing the Bouquet, 95.29. Let me tell you something about this. Ready? Sweet, fruity, and mellow flavor profile. It's 11 years old. It's young. 11 isn't that young. In terms of local spirit, it'd be considered prehistoric. But it's young for a lot of Scotch whisky fans out there. They'll see 11 and think, oh, it's not 12, it should be 12. It's Distillery 95. That is not a sexy distillery. It hasn't got a huge footprint or story or anything. They were the first to create the Singleton single malt. They were first to do Singleton because no one could say the distillery name, so they called it Singleton. That's something I learned of Andrew, actually. One of 288 bottles, a refill hoggy. Is anyone here on Team Refill? Come on, Team Refill. A light, vivacious, playful dram with sweet fruits, mentholated herbs, deft, earthy tones, ideal hip flask material. See, that's kind of fun. That sounds like a fun whiskey to me. And that's what I've got in this glass here. I poured one just before I went live. And it's lovely. It is everything you want out of this kind of whiskey. It's earthy, it's mineralic. I don't quite get the sweet fruits straight off the bat, but I definitely get that mentholated herbs. That's a really good word for it. But this was featured at our Sydney gathering. This is the first dram in the lineup. And you go, wow, it's like a young whiskey that is often overlooked from a distillery no one cares about. I call these sleepers. And I've said this at tastings before. I call them sleeper casks. They sit on outturns. Everyone's aiming for the big heavy hitters. They've all passed a quality panel already. Everyone's looking for the 29s and things like that. Whiskey Sec, hey, how you going? Team First Fill, Cal, that'll change. And you'll find some lovely refill casks that where the spirit and the refill character, oh, lovely. A good refill cask can be really quite sublime. So I'm on team refill at the moment, which I'm quite fond of. Hello to Jonah Cobe 31. I think I haven't seen you in here before. That's good. SW Gasson joined. We've met before. Here we go. And Juice Production says footprint leather boot aged whiskey. That sounds disgusting. Cool. So I haven't had any water today yet. I'm going to add a few drops because it really opens it up. And just a dash, just a wee dash. 57.9%. It'll still appreciate a drop of water. You don't need to be overly generous with it, but it works. Yeah, so it's definitely like mentholated herb. I love that in a dram. It almost has that diesel note, almost. Like I've said about some Glen Scotias and some Balmanacs in the past. Ooh. So 11 years in refill, it still has heaps of distillery character, not to be confused with new make character. Yeah, okay, Robert Akers raises a valid point. 136.1 was a first fill, but 3 years old. Otherwise, it would have been overcooked. And it was the same for 136.2 that we also did locally. And they were from a distillery out near St Andrews that I don't think we'll see too much out of for a little while. They had an ownership change just after we picked up those casks, but we'll see what happens. Does the glass affect the nose since the flue is ideal for rum, not whiskey? We've talked about glassware before, Cal. Getting the right glassware for a whiskey or a rum or a spirit, as you've seen me before, use the Society Copper for most whiskey I drink out of. There you go, one of those. We've got them on the website, and I've got the Thingo, the other glass over here, which is great for our spirits, for single cask spirits. I don't know if you can see all both those. There's two different types. I'm trying a Bormioli for this one. Bormiolis are slightly bigger, actually a fair bit bigger than the Society Spirit glass. They have a bigger bowl, but also a bigger nose on them. So I'm sort of like, I kind of like that one for the spirits, but I kind of like this one for some whiskies as well. The Fungry Dad joined. Thanks for joining. Bormioli for life. Whiskey Sec, you've got to try one of the spirit glasses. I reckon you might be convinced. One of the SCS glasses on our site, these ones, they've got a nice weight to them. Bormiolis are nice. They're a little bit light, but I like the weightiness of these SCSs, and the slightly smaller nose is a bit more compact for concentrated aromas. All personal preference. Now, I've had a few people ask me, and I don't want to rattle on too much about a whiskey that's not in outturn, but one that is in outturn, but I will mention though. Okay, Whiskey Sec, you can pick one up. It was one that I've already reviewed on this live stream before. And speaking of young whiskey, there we go. Now, please excuse my rather scuffed label. This has been bouncing around my bag, being shared around with people. So 140.1 Cornography. What a name, Cornography, right? Okay, sure. 3-year-old, 63.6% ABV, single cask strength from Distillery 140, which is the latest code in our system. We had 139 last month, 140 this month. We're powering ahead with new codes. So 140.1 is from Texas, and we've already said it's it's a Texas second fill barrique. What is a barrique? A barrique is essentially a barrique is essentially a French hogshead. That's the best way to describe it. So it's a French hogshead. It's 240, 250 litres normally, and use an X wine. So if it's been an X wine hoggy, that's an appropriate usage of the word barrique. It's a bit of an outdated word these days, but it's still used a bit like Kildurkins and Rundlets aren't really used much anymore, or octaves. Octaves are terrible anyway. That's my opinion. Okay, so I've blacked out the essential details, I'm sorry, because I can't reveal this yet. But this is a Society sample that went through the tasting panel and has been approved by UK tasting panel, but they wanted an outtake on it for something special. Hi, Deputy. Hello, Deputy. So this was a tasting sample that was sent through. I thought barriques are 225 and hogsheads 250. Sam, yeah, I'll just touch on that. Generally speaking, you're right. However, that number is so interchangeable, and that's why so many barriques can be as big as 250. It's a difference of one or two, I can't think it's two stave difference. So the actual coopering of those barriques can often be still barriques, but it's the easiest way because even whiskey barrels at 200 litres are often 215, 220. So the variation, 10, 20 litres here, isn't really paid too much attention to in the final output of that coopering. So yes, generally speaking, if we're strictly speaking, we are right. 225 and 245 is the official for Hoggy, but 245, 250. Every cask is a little bit different in size, even if it looks the same. The staves might be 1 millimeter thinner, and that adds 2 liters overall or something. There's always all those differences there. Brownie points for guessing the distillery. On this one, Cal, you can certainly try. I've got a sample code there, which is 4837. That doesn't mean anything, I promise. Cask 97972. That doesn't relate to the coding that we do at all. 57.8% current gauge strength. And it was filled on the 5th of August. That's when they sent me the sample. And this is one that we are going to bottle. Andrew and I have both assessed it now in full, and we are going to bottle this. We're taking the whole cask for Australia. We're super excited about this. The details of why we're bottling it, what it is, when we'll see it, is another story entirely that I can't go into just yet. I'm really sorry. But people are asking me about this, and I'll tell you right now, it's an unpeated whiskey. So those who guessed Lagavulin or Ardbeg earlier, that was some rather ambitious guesses for a full cask for our market. You don't see too many market exclusive Ardbeg casks these days. You might here or there, but not really. But this is kind of exciting. It's a duty paid sample of something. By the way, for those who saw on my Instagram story earlier, I didn't tape up the Angus Dundee part. It's not from the Angus Dundee stable. That's just where some of our casks are stored. So that's why it was drawn from that part of the warehouse. And what I will show you, have a look at the barrel char on this if you can get into that one. There you go. Barrel char sort of gives a bit away there. There we go. Yeah, it's Johnny Walker, Jamie Poos. It's definitely Johnny Walker. No, it's not. You know what? I'm gonna be running around sharing this with people over the next. I might have it tucked in my bag each time I'm sort of out and about. So do ask me for a dram. I still won't be able to tell you what it is yet, but tell me what you think it is. Or tell me what you like about it. Actually, even better. Who cares about what the distillery is? That's not what it's important to society anyway. It's about flavour for us. It's about picking out flavours and having fun with whiskey and finding things that might be completely opposite from the house style of that distillery. So, what's the point of talking about the distillery? No, Rowan, I'm sorry. I can confirm it's not the first Australian release. It did come from our Angus Dundee warehouses in Scotland. So it is a Scotch whiskey, but it's a very lovely one, I think. We are working on that. I've said that before. We're working on Australian whiskies. It's a long process, and you want to get it right. I would not want to bottle something where we say we're first with this. I'd want to bottle something where we go, we're really proud of this. And it's also, we want to bottle something at a price that makes sense that people can actually access it, not some sort of $1,000 shelf trophy that comes with a gold label and stopper or something. So with that comment made, with that little cheeky remark, that's where I wanted to just mention. I'll publish the tasting notes up online shortly, Cal. I'll put them up as a post. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of this this underrated 95.29. And hopefully I'll see you guys all again tomorrow. Not a big session tonight, like I say, just a couple of drams and a bit of a 20-minute chat, as I said. For a chance for us to catch up, get some questions out. Some good questions tonight, and I'm sure I can't reveal more about that. But I want to show you that in any outturn, you're going to find a variation of age statements like you will this month, from a 31 to a 3-year-old in October outturn, which is super exciting, and seeing that variation and depth of age across the spectrum of really interesting casks that you can really dig into. So October outturn is this Friday. I've reviewed just about every whiskey I have from that outturn that's in my office and open, which is about 6 out of the 13 releases I've got in here at the moment. So I really appreciate you tuning in, having a chat. Tim Tam slammed the dram. That's it. I have to do that now. Not tonight. I don't have Tim Tams nearby, but I'm going to get some Tim Tams and I'm going to do a Tim Tam slam on a dram, and we'll see if that works live on camera. That could be the most absurd thing I've ever said I could do. I might not do that, but anyway, I might give it a try. See what happens. Thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you all tomorrow. Cheers.